Gentrification. When I hear this word, I think city and people getting kicked out of apartments they've lived in for 30 years to make way for luxury condos. But gentrification can also be a rural phenomenon. Such is the case in Monson, Maine, a tiny town of 700 or so people. Monson's about 90 minutes northwest of Bangor, 2.5 hours northeast-ish from Portland. A group called the Lieber Foundation has been making a big investment here, buying up a lot of buildings around town. Their goal is to create an artist colony out of dilapidated houses and shuttered businesses. This ambitious idea drew Rachel, Julia, and me in like moths to your favorite wool sweater. Of course, our visit did not go exactly according to plan. I'm Dustin, that's Rachel, she's Julia. Three occasionally clueless 20-somethings who work at a TV station. We are a reporter, producer, and photographer who got the chance to explore Maine, meet the people succeeding, the people struggling, and find out just what is there to do and see in a state almost as quirky as we are. In other words, we saw Maine by the mile. Before we go any further, I have to lay down a couple disclaimers. One, we are going to talk about that artist colony I mentioned, but not right away. There were too many surprises leading up to our visit to Monson proper that this episode will actually be about Monson and its environs. The first of those towns is called Guilford, a short distance to the south. This is where Rachel, whom I still have not forgiven, booked an Airbnb at a place called the Haunting Mansion on the hill. Fittingly, we arrived there in the middle of the night, right after a thunderstorm.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Damn near perfect. How are you?
Pretty good.
Welcome.
Pretty good. Thank you.
It's a perfect night for you guys.
How was that?
The rain, the darkness, the water.
How likely is it that we're going to be very creeped out right now?
No, you won't be.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, because it's billed as the Haunted Mansion,
Well,
so...
there's reality to that.
The Trevore Mansion, as it's known, literally looks like it belonged to the Addams family. It didn't, but the house does have quite a colorful history.
5 of the people that originally were here, there were 13 children in the original family, died of tuberculosis. And 5, in fact, one of them that died, this was actually not uncommon in those days. When you died in the winter, there was no place to bury you because the ground was frozen solid. This is, after all, Maine.
Are you about to tell me that there's a dead person in there?
No, but what you would do at that time was you would bury the body in the basement, which they did, and then when the spring thaw comes, when summer rolls around and you can get into the ground, you dig the body up and then you place it into the grave outside.
And they did do that, right?
They did do that with one of the children that was here.
So again, to recap, we had arrived at a mansion that at the very least had a bunch of people die in it, used to be haunted, once had someone buried in its basement, almost burned to the ground, and were 3 20-somethings out on a road trip with nowhere else to stay. This was a little too M. Night Shyamalan for our taste, so Rachel, whose fault this all was, decided to call the cops.
We're just checking into this Airbnb, and it's billed as a haunted mansion, but it's just very, very creepy. So we just wanted to verify that you guys weren't going to be like, hey, actually, there are a couple missing people in the Guilford area. But you've never heard of anyone getting murdered there. She did not think I was psycho.
Since the cops seemed ambivalent and we were too tired to search for another place to sleep, we stayed after I checked under Rachel and Julia's bed. Now, if this were a horror movie, this is the part where we'd get murdered. Instead, I personally had a great night's sleep, which was a good thing since it prepared me to meet Robert.
We're not in the yuppie belt. We get people who stop here on the way to Greenville because a room just like the one you were in is, you can get that in Greenville for $350 to $500.
Robert Schaefer is the owner of the Trevore Mansion, and Trevor is Robert spelled backwards. Robert is a bit eccentric and is quite opinionated.
The yuppie belt, what is that?
The Volvo Coast, that sort of stuff. This place, when we bought it, was on the market for 14 years. Sure, there's lots of people who'd like to have a place like this, but they don't want to live in Guilford. They want to live in a fake Disney World fantasy zone where they can watch Netflix on their... Don't get me started.
He's a goldmine of historic factoids, especially about his house.
That's the front door of the house. That's it. Until 1894, that's where you went in and out.
The former lumber baron's mansion is his pride and joy. So much so that he's restored it twice. First when he bought it, then again beginning in 2011 after a fire devastated the place.
The fire marshal was never able to determine precisely what caused it. And about 9 o'clock at night, and the house was black with smoke. I thought the electricity had failed. The firefighters came and there was some arguing about what they could possibly do. And then, I went to the guy and I said, look, this is a National Historic Register property. The fire is in the front parlor there. You can knock this down. Go for it. And they went for it. They waited a little too long. The fire had climbed the wooden fire escapes into the attic. But we were able to save some of the stuff on the bottom. Or the door here, for example. See, it burned through the walls into the doors. This room was destroyed. Everything was destroyed, really. The tower was burned off.
The evidence of the fire is in the floorboards and doors. But in other spots, the fire unveiled unique wallpaper that had been hidden for years.
These are Moses Eaton stencils, the most famous stencil artist in history. A lady who'd worked with the Smithsonian came and restored them for us. They were under the wallpaper. You know how you get wallpaper off, right? You steam it? Yeah. I set the damn house on fire and run 1 million gallons through it. Comes right off. Anyway, he did this probably in 1835 or 1836. He would go to the homes of the rich and the prominent and put these in because wallpaper costs too much.
After Robert's extremely extensive 2-hour tour, the haunted house started to feel like a not-so-haunted home. Especially later in the day, that's when Robert decided to pour gasoline over a giant pile of sticks for a bonfire. It was a little close to our car for my taste, but when in Guilford. If you don't feel like sitting around waiting for a ghost to find you all day, there are plenty of options for outdoor activities in the area. There's fishing, cruising nearby Moosehead Lake in a historic steamboat, or going on a good old-fashioned hike. A great place to get your cliff on is Mount Kaneo State Park on Moosehead Lake in Rockwood. The easiest way to the state park is taking a boat across the lake.
Welcome to Maine in early August, where it can be in the mid-60s.
$10 round trip per person for that ride. When you get off the boat, a golf course is right in front of you. The trails are to your left. If you try doing this hike, we recommend not going at 4 o'clock in the afternoon like us.
It's like a real vacation, you don't always time everything perfectly.
The last boat back to the dock and our car was at 6, which meant we only had 2 hours to enjoy the serenity and lake views.
Say it with me. Cardio, cardio.
Okay, well, maybe I enjoyed the serenity and lake views more than Rachel.
If you fall, I'll catch you.
I think I'll just knock you down the fucking mountain. This is an easy hike. What is a medium hike? And when does it just become rock climbing?
At the top of Mount Kaneo is a fire tower, and this spectacular view, which you can really enjoy, as mentioned before, when you have the proper amount of time. Alrighty, so we talked about the Trevore Mansion in Guilford, we talked about the crazy cliff hikes in Rockwood. Now, let's get to our main course, Monson. The tiny town had 2 somewhat notable reasons to visit before this whole artist colony business, which I promise we're going to get to in just a second. Anyway, here are the 2 things. The first, Monson is the last stop on the Appalachian Trail for through hikers en route to Mount Katahdin. The second, Monson is known for its slate. If you're an interior designer type, I'm sorry if you've been watching this show bored out of your mind. Your reward is this, a peek at the Monson location of Sheldon Slate. Technically, Sheldon is a New York headquartered small business, but we're not going to hold that against them. The black Monson slate they get here is definitely Maine made, and was around thousands of years before the term Mainer was even a thing.
You, in some ways, are a rock star.
Yeah, literally. We're a 5th-generation family business. We have quarries in New York, Vermont, and here in Maine.
And these are the best ones, right?
Well, they're all good.
John Tatco Jr. runs the show at the Monson outpost of Sheldon Slate. This is where all the big custom jobs for the company are done, with slate from all over the place. So even if you don't want a green custom slate sink or slate cabinetry, you can still get one in red or black.
What is this going to be again?
Some of several pieces that are in a big shower and a steam shower. And these are the outside jambs and header of the door going in. Then there's multiple other parts that we have to make, some really sophisticated things. So it's kind of like a human car wash.
How often does somebody come in asking for a human car wash?
More often than you'd think.
On average, let's say somebody came in for like a set of countertops. How much would that cost?
An average job that we do, an average kitchen is probably somewhere in the... There's a kitchen we did for. Oh, if I had to pick an average, maybe $4,000.
Running a successful small business in Monson isn't a joyride. It's not easy to find skilled labor in rural Maine, and that affects how John looks at his community.
I just went through a tour of Sappi over in Skowhegan, and all the guys are gray-haired guys like me. You need a workforce of guys in their 20s. It's hard, dirty, same as here. We get dirty. And it's not a bad thing. Nobody wants to get dirty. And you have to get dirty to make things.
Do you think, I mean, I don't want to get, I mean, this is business, it's not politics, but I want to talk broadly, not Republican, Democrat right now. But do you think that the politicians are getting dirty and doing the hard work and trying to work together?
No, I don't. Think of the money that was wasted shutting the state down. You know, you wouldn't waste that in a business. You know, we try to do everything we can to save money, to keep in business. And I think you lose touch with that in the government level, that they don't really understand the waste. You know, it's more about egos.
Okay, so it's finally time to hear about the artist colony. Here's the setup. The Lieber Foundation, a philanthropic group also behind Maine's Pineland Farms, is buying up buildings to attract artists to Monson. They see the location as the type of idyllic place an artist would want to work. They think artists can sometimes have a hard time finding space for their family and workshops with all the tools they need. Of course, that's all expensive, too. What the foundation has done is buy buildings like Monson's community center and repurpose them into artist workspaces. At the same time, they've bought and rehabbed houses for artists to live in. The guy in charge of making all this run smoothly is Lucas Butler. He used to be Monson's town manager, so he knows full well what the community's needs are.
Now, you guys could have picked 100 different towns in Maine about this size with a similar story about, you know, there not being a ton of jobs there. Why did you pick this one?
Monson's extremely unique statewide. There's really no comparison to it. You have the long time, you know, probably getting close to 100 years now, the influence of the Appalachian Trail and the hikers that hike it. You have this great recreational resource of water right in the middle of downtown here. You have Lake Hebron. This goes another 3.5 miles up and opens up into quite a big lake. You have this long time history of industry. All these things come together, including what our main focus is here, is this long time history of artists. So Monson's always been this like hotbed of artists. So you take all these different pieces and you put them together, and Monson was the perfect fit for what we wanted to do.
Talk more about how people reacted when they found out that you guys were just going to come in here.
I think people didn't really know what to expect.
Did you know what to expect?
I had an idea of what might happen. I didn't realize what the scale would be.
To give us an idea of what buildings would look like after Lieber was done with them, Lucas brought us over to a general store, slated, literally, to open the next day.
So this is the new Monson General Store. This was been the general store for well over 100 years, I think. Closed in 2009. We purchased the building in January, and we started remodeling in February, and there's the finished product. A completely remodeled, fully functional general store.
It was a striking sight to see. A gleaming, polished store like you'd find in a Martha Stewart magazine, not really like rural Maine. Out of place? Depends how you look at it. Is the Lieber Foundation really going to single-handedly save a struggling town? Who knows? What's clear is their idea is unique and makes Monson worth visiting, though I'd argue the breakfast burritos at Pete's Place are also a worthy reason to go. If you do find yourself in Monson, you'll be in the company of some optimists, determined their tiny Maine town make it another generation. And on top of that, there's a bunch of amazing Maine scenery dotted with all kinds of characters. The type of people who will show you the hidden waterfalls, first-class hammocks, and homemade pie crusts we discovered next time on Maine by the Mile.